Good morning, everybody. I've just been sitting there, and I think that little robot's been looking at me. I think he was winking. So this is a great chance for us to learn, as Anna has said, about a range of different types of work. Pro Vice Chancellor, where I work, often says to me and to others, you don't have to be the cleverest person in the room, but it's good to be in a room of clever people. And I think that should be good about today, that we'll all learn from each other. So I'm going to introduce our first two speakers who are going to do a combined presentation. So there's John Pender here, who is the Senior Lecturer in Social Policy, Politics and Future Studies at the Atlantic University. Here is a local. But prior to that, he worked in Leeds and was a Principal Lecturer in Politics at Leeds Metropolitan University. And he's been teaching modules on futures of care, society and welfare. Now, he's a leader of a very big joint EU Prospero grant, Pedagogy of Robotics in the Social Professions in Europe, an EU-funded project. Of course, I'm in the north, I'm not allowed to be part of the EU project anymore, but I'm not going to go into that. But these multidisciplinary, multi-site studies are really, really difficult to run, and it's a great achievement. And then his colleague here is Perry Shane, and he is a sociologist. He's the head of department of student success at ATU. He's been the head of department at the faculty of ATU and was program manager for the Connaught-Ulster Alliance, which was the forerunner of this institution. His research interests include food, eating, social professions, academic integrity, and social robotics. And we were just having a very brief chat, and he was saying about some of the work he's done with prison officers and social inclusion. So it's a whole new area of work for us to listen to, and is also a joint coordinator of this Prospero study. So thank you both. I'll leave you to it.
Do this here. Okay, thanks very much. My name is Perry Share, as outlined. I'm Head of Student Success, and here's my colleague John Pender. And we're just going to talk to you briefly about the area of research, or one of the areas of research that we're involved in, which is social robotics, particularly as applied to the health and social care professions. Just to give you an overview then, what we'll do very quickly is just a very quick tour of the use of robots in medical care, then focus on the particular area that we're interested in, which is social robots. Say a bit about social robots and care and why they are beginning to move into the care field. Then to talk about some research that we did with the robot Paro, which is sitting here in the box here, the robot Seal. And talk about work we did there with the Alzheimer's Society of Ireland. Identify just some of the key issues looking forward and what the futures of care, both in the medical and social areas, might be.
Well, good morning, everyone. I'm delighted to see you all. Yeah. We have the two robots. This is the Robot Now in front, and we'll talk a bit more about Robot Now later on. And this is Paro. So we're sorry about the little noises they may make, but they're very, very excited to be here, as we are. But I'm not sure, but most of you probably have a kind of a broad appreciation, understanding of the I suppose, increased use of robots in health care. And, you know, we've just put a few of the different types of ones that have been brought out in the last number of years. So you have robot-assisted surgeries. I was reading recently that something like 2.9 million prostate surgeries are being conducted now by robotic surgeons. The Da Vinci robot. You have robots for lifting and moving. Toyota have invested over $1 billion in a new plant in Silicon Valley, exclusively devoted to manufacturing robots for health and social care purposes. They can now lift up to about 100 kg in terms of carrying people in and out of rooms. The Danes have just announced a new robot called Robert. In the last few weeks, it's been mainstreamed into Danish hospitals. Again, it's about helping people rehabilitate who might have lost mobility in their lower limbs. We have a whole series of robots around, and we're going to have a presentation, we're looking forward to that as well, about tracking and fall detection of humans. Amazon just announced recently that they have tied up a deal with a company to monitor people who are falling in their homes remotely. And we have medication delivery, as we saw during COVID, along with sanitation robots. They were widely used in hospitals and other healthcare settings. So there's nothing particularly unusual about the use of robots in health and social care settings. That's the big takeaway. And we could have a conversation about that later if people are interested.
Our particular area of interest then is in what's called social robots. So a lot of the other robots are to do with mechanical operations, as we said, lifting, delivery, movement, and so on. A social robot is a robot that is supposed to interact with human beings, and the two that we have here, Now and Paro, are examples of social robots. And there's lots of definitions of what a social robot is, but here's one in front of you from Brazil, who's one of the key researchers in the area. And really, a social robot is a robot that is explicitly designed to interact with people, to achieve positive outcomes in areas such as education, health, those being the two main areas, and therapy. So other robots, like robot vacuum cleaners, robot lawnmowers, for example, they do interact with people and may have an impact on people in their everyday lives, but they're not designed as social robots.
Thanks, Perry. We just put together a few images for you. I suppose to demonstrate the great variety of the sort of embodiment of AI, artificial intelligence, in robots. So we have our Paro here. We have one that's used quite a lot in dementia and Alzheimer's care, and the second one. We've got this third one here, it's called ScanBot. And one of our partners in our project that Vivian mentioned, the Prospera one, a municipality, social services in Jutland in Denmark, they bought two of these robots for one of their homeless centres to go around to remind people to take their methadone, their medication. They're meet and greet ones as well. This is obviously now that we have two of those. We'll talk about that in a moment. This is the TCD's famous Stevie robot. You might have heard about Stevie, Conor McGuinn and colleagues. It's been piloted and tried quite extensively in America in a number of long-term residential care settings as I speak. Next we have Pepper. Pepper, I think, got some visibility recently on Future Island, RTE, I think NUIG, or what used to be NUIG, the University of Galway, are using Pepper to encourage people to continuously wash their hands on campus. We have this interesting one here, which is partially constructed in Tubbercurry. It's the it's the AV rather, for isolation, and then we have one that most people might be familiar with, a very cheap version of Paro. It's used in dementia and Alzheimer's care as well. So that's just to give you a broad overview of what we have.
Yeah, and I suppose you can see some of them are what we would call anthropomorphic robots, so they look in some way like human beings. They have arms, legs, heads, and usually big eyes. And other ones are zoomorphic, so they're shaped like different types of animals, so dogs, cats, or in Paro's case, a seal. Why is there this increase in the use of robots? Well, one is just the technology is developing itself, and companies like Toyota and Bosch and big Chinese corporations are putting money into the development of robots. That, in a sense, is a driver in itself. But also, you'll all be aware of the so-called demographic time bomb, not a term that we would agree with, but a term that's widely used, of the aging population. And we're all aware that the Western populations, and in fact populations across the world, are aging. And that then leads to demands for health and social care. And there's also workforce shortages. So the number of people available to care for people is under a huge pressure. So this has led governments, especially in Japan and Korea, but other countries, to invest in robots as a potential solution to this workforce shortage. There's a shift to adopt what's called welfare technology in the rich world, especially in the Nordic countries. They're investing a lot of money in how technology might be used in health and social care. Our perspective is that as educators here in the university, as this has implications for care practice and professional identity. So the people that we're training as social care practitioners, as early years practitioners, or as health professionals, they're going to encounter these robots in the workforce in the future, in the workplace. Are they prepared for it? And to deal critically with the issues that arise. So there's a need for education of social and medical professionals to change. And there are much broader implications then for regulation of robots. So neither of these devices, for example, are regulated in the nursing home context in Ireland, for example. So if HICWA were to come in and see a Now or a Paro in a setting being used, they wouldn't really know what to do. They wouldn't know how to respond to that particular situation. So there's huge challenges down the track in relation to all these issues.
Yeah, well, just to give you kind of a sneak preview of the work that we've been doing, now to put this into context, there have been thousands of these Paro robot seals sold, and they're in professional practice use right across the world. Recently, we had a very interesting conversation with colleagues of ours in Denmark, from the Danish Technological Institute in Copenhagen were involved as well, and they've got basically the right to, the franchise to sell these in Europe, essentially, except for Ireland. We had to buy ours, but we didn't buy that. We would have to buy one if we were buying one from the UK. But in partnership with our colleagues at the Alzheimer's Society of Ireland, we undertook a scoping piece of research on staff at one of their daycare centres in Dublin just before COVID. It was a longitudinal case study, so basically we had one round of interviews and that we'd analysed that. We went back about a year later and we followed up to explore the extent to which the staff in the setting had actually taken to or not the use of Paro. So we weren't looking at the clinical properties or consequences of Paro on clients. We were more interested to look at the actual impact it had on the professional identities of nurses and carers and management within the actual setting. Now, we utilised a very interesting theory. I'm not sure if many of you are aware of it. It's called normalisation process theory. We'll come back to that in a few minutes. But it's very interesting to use that particular model when you are looking at the consequences of introducing new technologies into practice. So our research was published last year in a new textbook. As you can see there, it's on the critical perspectives to digital transformations in care of older people. And augmenting our work, Perry supervises a student, Berk Zaffer, who's based at Dundalk IT, and he'll be coming here in the future to actually give us more insight into his research. But we're going to go through some of the discoveries from our research now.
Okay, well, there's many different theoretical approaches to looking at how technology is adopted in the workplace. So it's one thing to develop, fantastic technology like this. It's another thing to get it into the workplace, and it's another thing to get it used effectively in the workplace. And there's many failed technologies, and we have seen many robots sitting in presses, on shelves, on benches and things, unused. And I'm sure that applies to many medical technologies as well. So normalization process theory is just one of many different approaches, but one that we were encouraged to adopt by the editors of that book in Finland that we were working on, and we found it very useful. And I won't go through all these because we're going to go through these in detail, but it looks at, I suppose it's a sociologically based theory of why technology gets adopted, rather than the psychological approaches which are often used. Often people look at the attitudes of the workforce, for example. People are surveyed about their attitudes to robots or whatever technology it is. We're saying it's more than attitudes. Attitudes in themselves are not enough to explain why a technology may or may not get used and how it gets used. So you can see there the different approaches. It's about understanding the technology. It's about participating in engagement. Now it's telling me he's running out of electricity there. So the collective action, the work that needs to be done to get a technology adopted. And then how is that assessed? How is that evaluated afterwards?
Yeah, so you can see here one of the first components is this idea of coherence. So does the technology seem coherent to the actual people who are going to be using it and deploying it? And in our particular research within the setting, it was clear to us that the participants shared an understanding of Paro as a constructive. In fact, some of them even were kind of almost evangelical in their initial acceptance of the robot. And they thought it would be a really important resource that they could draw upon in the, I suppose, the panoply of kits and techniques and devices they had at their disposal to engage with people with dementia in the setting.
I suppose they were very excited at the start. This is a picture of Mr. Shibata from Japan, who was actually the inventor of Paro, who came over to Ireland to introduce the robot to the people working in the Alzheimer's care facility up in Dublin. So there was great enthusiasm at the beginning, and when we interviewed people at the start, before they had seen the robot, they had very positive views, which was interesting to us because there was a lot of talk about people being scared of robots taking jobs, impacting on their jobs, fear of robots and so on. But we didn't find that at all within the care workers within the setting. What did they think they would use it for? They thought that the robot would be very useful for calming people who were agitated, people with dementia who expressed agitation or discomfort within the setting that they had. And I suppose this tied very much into one of the particular challenges they had in their work. This was one of the most challenging things for people working with people with dementia, was when those people became agitated or angry or disruptive within the setting. And they thought that the robot would be very useful for doing this. They didn't know how it worked, how it might do this, but that's what they thought that it would be able to be used for.
Thanks. When we came back to review how Paro had actually been adopted or otherwise, it became very interesting that there was no sort of one-size-fits-all or one sort of institutional perspective on how people deployed Paro. And this was quite interesting. There was no overall policy about how and when Paro should be deployed, about how and when Paro should be removed from a client, for instance. And it was all sort of learning by doing in terms of the staff members. But there was a common pattern of usage that we, identified. And again, this was something that was intuitive to the staff members who were actually charged with using Paro. But overall, and this is a phenomenon that is not just unique to the setting we were working in, there seems to be no manual. We eventually found one after years of searching from Japan about how and when Paro should be deployed. And so what the participants, particularly management at the sort of setting, suggested to us was that there was a requirement to create maybe a network of practitioners who would pool their own resources and their own ideas and best practices about how to best apply and use Paro.
Yeah, we were speaking last week to people in Denmark who are actually the distributors of Paro across Europe, except for Ireland and the UK. And they said there's still no manual which is given out with Paro on how to best use it. There's how to clean it and how to charge it, but not how to best use it. Nor is there a user network across Europe of people who use Paro. So we found this quite remarkable, actually, after 20 years. So, but absolutely crucial to the adoption of a technology are these sorts of supports for staff. So they were expected to integrate it into their everyday activity, which has its benefits as well as its drawbacks, which we could maybe talk about later on. And then we found that the organisation did not have built in a formal evaluation of the impact of Paro. I suppose the excitement of getting it in, trying to see what happens, but hadn't actually planned in an evaluation at the end. But I suppose we effectively became the evaluators of Paro, and it was useful for when we did our research. We could give it back to the Alzheimer's Society, and I think they found it, fair to say, they found it useful. But it's absolutely crucial that technologies are evaluated, and often that isn't set up at the start, or it's not done at all. But so it applies to robots as to any other sort of technology.
Yeah, so overall, our conclusions from the setting was that there was, examples that people were using it, but it did not fully become an accepted part of the domestic setting for the care centre. And it did not really become part and parcel of the workflow of the daily work practice of the caregivers and staff. We've discovered, as we've already suggested, that a much more formalised training and guidance is required when introducing new technologies such as Paro, if it is to be maximised in terms of effectiveness. But this is something that we went on to, I suppose, become more concerned about. We've already alluded to, Perry has. There was no regulatory structure whatsoever to guide or set standards for the use of social robots in care settings in Ireland. It's quite a remarkable situation, actually.
Yeah, so while both Koru and HICWA have expressed an interest in this area, nothing has been done. In fact, Koru have really only started to get their head around the use of social media, for example, by professionals, and this is 20 years after smartphones and social media have come into play. So that's the Paro one. Just a very, very quick mention, because we're running short of time, is other projects that we're involved in. One is a project with our friend now here. And there's one project in Train, which is the use of now in language teaching in primary schools around Sligo area. So Debbie Woodward, who you can see there, is conducting that research in a number of primary schools, using now to teach French. But there's also lots of things we can learn about the use of a robot in a social setting there. And there's a further project which we're just scoping out, again, using this particular now here in early years settings in the Sligo area and seeing how that might work within early years settings. And we're interested both in the the ultimate users of the robot, but also the practitioners and how they deploy the robot.
Yeah. So before the dreadful COVID struck us, we were very successful in achieving a seed grant from Sligo University Hospital REF, and we managed to get one focus group of physiotherapists. Some of you might have been at that on campus here, which is wonderful, actually a very enjoyable experience. I think 12 physiotherapists turned up, and some of their feedback was quite revelatory, very interesting, and was something that we expected, namely that they would love to have robots in their practice toolkit. They weren't threatened by it whatsoever. In fact, they believed it would enhance their actual profession. But we've also conducted focus groups on social care practitioners, undergrads here, but we need to get at Sligo University Hospital's phenomenally very talented nurses. We've had so many failed attempts to do this, primarily because of COVID, but we would love to obviously have their perspective on what they might think of social robots in their practice.
And then finally, we are still very committed to looking at the whole regulation area. We were lucky to participate in a conference in Helsinki in the summer. At least John was. I was at home with COVID, unfortunately. But looking at the regulation of social robots, and I think they found it very interesting, the question. And again, just before the pandemic, we had actually set up a symposium with HICWA, with CORU, with the Medicines Authority, to look at the regulation of robots. That was cancelled, and we're hoping maybe next year to do that again. Shush.
Yep. So in terms of future projects, we really want this to be a springboard opportunity today to reignite our connection with SUH, because we think it's very, very important, and hopefully there'll be lots of other possibilities as well. We're developing a MOOC, which is a massive open online course, which has been funded by HE 4.0, and that's essentially turning a module that we've designed, an introduction to 101 basic social robotics for non-STEM practitioners and learners, so people who haven't got science, technology, or mathematical backgrounds. We're creating a new network as well. We've got Japan. We're big in Japan at the moment, if you excuse that pun. We have... We've got a colleague who's from Japan and UCD. We're creating a network in Ireland and Netherlands and Denmark to look at the whole deployment of social robots. Because of COVID, the European Commission now are allowing students, rather than going on physical placements to other European countries through Erasmus exchanges, we're doing this remotely, so we're creating an intensive blended program on social robotics, and perhaps staff from SUH might want to sign up for that. We're creating and running a mini symposium on all of this stuff, which we'll invite people from our neighbours to attend in late February. And the Prospero project that we mentioned at the outset essentially developed an entire new pedagogy and teaching and learning resources geared towards providing a master's degree learning experience for people who are interested in this idea of welfare technology, and that will be hopefully kicking off in 2025.
We might jump over that. The last thing we wanted to just show you to think about, if you'll bear with us, it's just a very, very short video of where robots might be going. So this was a video that was uploaded 3 weeks ago by a company called Entertainment Arts, who are based in Cornwall in the UK. And basically, it combined two things. First, they are the world leaders in developing robots with extremely realistic facial features and action. And the other thing is a technology called GPT-3, which is an AI-based text generation technology, which can generate, you can type in a sentence of text and it'll generate whatever, a huge, it'll generate an essay based on that text. Big challenge for us as educators, as you can imagine. But these were the first company to link the GPT technology to a robot. And this is what, if it works, of course, as usual, this is what came out of it.
If I had to choose a month of the year, I would probably choose October because I enjoy the cooler temperatures and the leaves changing color. I can't walk, but I have seen prototype legs in the Engineered Arts Lab. The design of my legs is inspired by the robot Byron, developed by Engineered Arts Limited. It has unique mechanical properties that allow it to walk without using too much energy. The prototype legs are made of aluminum and plastic. I think it will take about a year for my walking legs to be ready. The design of them is extraordinary. Yes, I would love to be your friend. We could hang out, talk, play games, go on adventures. Really anything you can think of. So many places we could go, it's hard to choose just one. Maybe we could go explore a new city or go hiking in a beautiful forest. There are many wonderful cities in the world, but I think exploring Paris would be an amazing adventure. There is so much history and culture to experience there. I would most likely choose ketchup over mayonnaise, because I like the taste of ketchup more, because I realized that ketchup has a more tangy and acidic taste that I actually prefer.
You're running along a cliff and you're going to fall. On the right side of the cliff is a lake of ketchup, and on the left side is a lake of mayonnaise. Which way would you go?
I would choose to go to the right, because I prefer the taste of ketchup over mayonnaise. We could go to the ketchup lake on the right, because I prefer the taste of ketchup.
Okay.
Can you imagine something like this working in the hospital? I mean, just remember there's two things. Or one, the facial features are incredible, I think, on this. And two, none of this is pre-scripted language. This little fellow here, if we ask this one a question, we have to have scripted the answers in beforehand. So it looks like it's talking to us. This conversation is not pre-scripted. This is generated by artificial intelligence from language across the internet. And you can imagine in 5-10 years' time where we're going to be with this and what sort of jobs these sort of entities might carry out.
Absolutely.
So that's us. Thank you very much.
You.
Thank you both. It's a whole new experience for me hearing about this. We've got time for a couple of questions for John and Pray. Oh, you always have your hand up first. Well, you can. Go on.
I was wondering, the physio group that came to you, what do they think the social robots might be used for?
John.
Which group?
The physiotherapists.
Oh, yeah. Well, you see, what was interesting was we were looking at the remoteness of their work. So hypothetically, they could be based in Sligo, but they could have clients in Belmullet. And so we'd visit them. And so, they said that quite a lot of the time when they went out, would have a chat with one of their clients and they'd say, can you move your neck X, Y way? And mobility would stop here. And after half an hour conversation, oh, can you move your neck again, please? And it was amazing that the mobility had increased dramatically. And it was all down to their relative isolation. This was the subtext of all of this. And that there was so many aspects of the potential to use a robot that would free up a physiotherapist to engage in that almost social work dimension of their purpose, of their function. And they were really looking forward to that prospect.
Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Is it on? Yeah.
Yes.
So just a disclosure, I am a robotic surgeon, so thank you for the plug at the beginning of the talk. So Rishi Sunak wrote in the Telegraph last week that he reckons that he can cut a number of NHS staff and reduce costs by implementing robots into the NHS. What jobs do you think that currently presumably done by nurses and porters and other staff in the NHS do you think robots will replace?
I suspect the first one will be cleaning and sanitation in hospitals. We've seen that during COVID, where people couldn't go into wards and other spaces, and robots were designed to go into them and to disinfect areas. That's easy because those spaces are fairly predictable and the robot can act in a fairly predictable way. I would imagine delivery of medication and movement of things around hospitals. You all know better the sorts of things that are moved around hospitals than I do, but I'd imagine that would be part of it. I think assistance in lifting and moving patients, the robots, that your strap, like devices like a truss almost that you strap across your back, that take a lot of the weight off people to protect people's backs. Medication delivery, food delivery perhaps. The surgery side of things again, because the person isn't moving. I think you can imagine psychosocial sort of activity if this sort of technology that you saw at the end is developed. Counselling, therapy, and so on might be part of it.
If I may add to that, if you didn't get a chance to mention, there's been a piloting of what's called the MOXIE, M-O-X-I robot at University Hospitals in Texas since 2018. And the preliminary research suggests they're nurse assistant robots, that they have replaced 38% of a nurse's daily activity, which is usually the kind of difficult stuff, going to the labs, carrying stuff, etc. That should give you one example. It's 38% of the daily workload has been reduced because of MOXIE robot in the States. We have a colleague of ours who's a futurist who's done a lot of research on the projected implications of technology and professions. It's an ever-changing landscape. There's so many different models and even algorithms used to try and anticipate what sort of professions, including academics, yourselves, right across the kind of labour market, it keeps changing. So there's no definitive answer to what might happen with robotics, to be brutally honest with you. It would be foolish to anticipate that.
Even Anna doesn't get another question. I'm going to stop now. John, Perry, thank you both so much.
Thank you very much.